Tonight, new alliances are taking shape in a shifting world order as Washington narrows its global role and prioritizes homeland security. Europe and India are moving closer on defense, security and trade. Could this partnership signal a start of a new global balance, where traditional alliances are being redefined? We're going to attempt to answer this question here on Think Tank. I'm Maham Morsi.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
India and the EU have finalized a landmark free trade deal hailed by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen as the mother of all deals. According to The Guardian, the agreement opens India's market to EU products while easing exports of Indian textiles, gems and pharmaceuticals. The EU says it could double exports to India by 2032 and save European companies around €4 billion in duties. Von der Leyen called it a free trade zone of 2 billion people benefiting both sides after meeting Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Delhi. The newspaper reports that this is a part of a broader push, including a security pact to strengthen maritime security, counter terrorism, and cooperation amid global tensions with the US, China, and Russia. And according to an opinion piece in Le Monde, Europe's deepening engagement with India reflects a strategic search for alternatives in a shifting global order. Von der Leyen has returned to New Delhi alongside European Council President Antonio Costa following recent visits to German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and ahead of a trip by French President Emmanuel Macron. The move underscores Brussels' sustained investment ties with India. Despite earlier setbacks in trade talks, with the EU and India are now converging politically, seeking to signal that alternatives to the US exit. For India, the pressure includes US tariffs aimed at curbing its purchases of Russian oil. For Europe, it reflects growing unease over China's economic weight and Russia's war in Ukraine. Le Monde argues this alignment brings together two middle powers acting defensively, navigating a world reshaped by US policy shifts, Chinese influence, and the rising geopolitical risk, while raising questions about how far Europe is willing to go in redefining its alliances.
A quiet but consequential realignment is unfolding on the global stage as India and the European Union deepen their strategic partnership, expanding cooperation in defense, maritime security, and climate action. What began as issue-based engagement is now evolving into a comprehensive alignment, driven by shared concerns over global instability and shifting power dynamics. Throughout 2025, talks gained momentum on a potential India-EU security and defense partnership, supported by sustained high-level exchanges among defense officials, policymakers, and industry leaders. The timing is significant. This expanding cooperation comes as Europe reassesses its traditional security dependencies, with Washington's 2026 U.S. defense strategy prioritizing homeland security and scaling back military support for allies. Brussels is increasingly seeking diversified partnerships beyond the transatlantic framework. At the same time, economic ties have reached a critical milestone, The long-awaited India-EU Free Trade Agreement, described by both sides as the mother of all partnerships, has now been finalized.
We did it. We delivered the mother of all deals.
During her visit to New Delhi, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the two sides were making history, while Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi called the deal a landmark moment in bilateral relations. The agreement comes as Brussels and New Delhi look to open new markets amid rising global trade tensions, including US tariffs and Chinese export controls. The EU views India as a key growth market for the future, while India sees Europe as an important source for technology and investment. Together, India and the EU are not just strengthening ties, they are moving beyond partnership towards strategic alignment, reshaping their roles as traditional global power structures are redefined.
To talk to us more about the EU New Delhi Pact, we're joined from New Delhi by Niraj Singh Manas, a special advisor for South Asia at the Parlay Policy Initiative, and from London by Nicholas Williams, a former NATO official. Thank you for joining me here on Think Tank. Let's start off with you, Mr. Manas. Now, with the new agreements reached between the EU and India, are we witnessing the re-emergence or emergence of alternative security anchors outside the traditional transatlantic system?
Thank you so much for inviting me. I think we absolutely are seeing something new with these EU-India deals, because the traditional Atlantic setup like the NATO and the heavy US involvement has been the go-to for decades, but now we are looking at a very fresh partnership that stands on their own. So just taking this example, like EU-India Security and Defense Partnership, which was signed just today on January 27. So it's all about, teaming up on things like keeping sea routes safe. It is just for the fighting terrorism, dealing with the hybrid threats, cyber issues, space tech, and stopping the spread of weapons. And India brings its a very strong presence in the Indo-Pacific, where it is already a key player in the just for maintaining the regional stability. And when the EU also adds up into this partnership, so this is EU adds up a new tech, how their kind of experiences in the international diplomacy, and both EU and India can collaborate together. So it's not about ditching the old alliance. It's more about creating a more multipolar setup where countries like India and EU can handle global problems without always relying on the US-led model. For example, in the early years also, because security and defense has been a very focal point. So all these plus joint projects in the technology and the industry would, bolster a free and fair Indo-Pacific, and regional cooperation will also be maintained. So as I see that, all the aggression expansion is happening in the Indian Ocean and the Indo-Pacific. So this could become a very solid anchor for the security for both the India and EU.
Okay, Mr. Williams, let's get your take here. Now, do you agree there that this is also a means by which the EU could diversify its portfolio along with India? Or do you think that this is related to the EU trying to move away from Washington, given the new defense strategy and the tensions when it comes to issues like Greenland?
Yes, good afternoon. I agree with your guest from Delhi. This is not so much breaking out from old relationships and alliances. It is an attempt to bring together two economic areas which benefit each other, and to signal that, yes, we don't depend, the EU doesn't depend so much absolutely on the United States, and India doesn't depend so much absolutely on supplies from Russia or anywhere else. So it's a positive thing. It shows that globalization is not dead.
Okay, but do you think that there's a possibility that the defense strategy by Washington is also an influencing factor here?
Yeah, yes, of course. I mean, it's taken almost 20 years to negotiate this agreement, and with some setbacks, because the Indian and European uh, um, objectives were not the same. So it's a significant timing that it is signed now, and all the stumbling blocks have been removed in order to signal that there is a world outside the domination of the United States.
Okay, Mr. Manhas, now this pact has been 20 years in the making, according to Mr. Williams there. How significant do you think it is that in the EU free trade agreement is important, I guess, in reinforcing some sort of strategic alignment between both parts of this region?
So as you know that, after the almost 20 years of talks, they have tried to wrap it up yesterday on January 26th, and announced it today that, they are finally going to work on this idea. So basically, it cuts tariffs on like approximately 96.6% of EU goods, which is actually heading to India, and nearly 99% of the Indian goods going on the other way. So that's rolled out over up to the 10 years. So, few of the experts have also said that EU exports to India by 2032, building on the current $136.5 billion in trade from the last fiscal years. So it's a huge opportunity for the jobs and the growth in the sectors like cars, wines, drugs, and services on the EU side, and textile and the farming and IT for the India. But beyond these numbers, I would say that it is also about the strategy, because helping both sides spread out that trade, so they are not dependent on one partner, especially with the things like economic pressure from elsewhere.
Yes.
So
So do
now
you
we
think
are
that this is
also.
possibly a way, I guess, for both the EU and India to not be dictated by US interests?
Yeah, definitely, because we are also now talking about, because I just now mentioned, because it is just not about dependent on just one partner. It is also about the strategy, how India and EU can spread out the trade, and they are not dependent on one, especially because of the economic pressure which is coming from elsewhere. And now we are talking about linking up the supply chains in the key areas like chips and the green technology, which builds trust and make the relationships strong overall. So with the combined market of 2 billion people and the quarter of the world's GDP, so this is just not about trade. So it is also the way to boost resilience in uncertain times, like the US tariffs is popping up. So yeah, definitely this will add the value to and the partnership between India and EU also in the coming time.
Okay, Mr. Williams, now the new Pentagon strategy mentions US interests in Greenland as well as what they've termed as key terrain. Does this more transactional US approach make the EU India partnership the most important stability anchor, I suppose, left in the rule based order?
Well, I think this US defense strategy confirms what Trump has already said, and it also confirms how the Trump administration regards Europe in terms of a weak conglomeration of allies who need to be encouraged to defend themselves. So the EU and Europeans more widely are looking for lessening the dependency on the United States and strengthening their own cooperation, because in a way India can't help Russia, can't help the EU against Russia. It has condemned the invasion of Ukraine, but it has been lukewarm in its condemnation and resistance to Russia. So they're far apart in this strategic issue.
Okay, Mr. Manas, India has long valued the idea of multi-alignment, which you've brought up as well, when it comes to balancing relations with the US, Russia, and Europe. By signing this deal that's been called the mother of all deals and the defense pact, has New Delhi finally chosen a side, or is it still on the idea of multi-alignment here?
Certainly, I believe that no, I don't think that New Delhi is picking up sides at all. This is actually a perfect example of India sticking to its multi alignment game plan, because India has always played it smart by juggling ties with the US. With Russia and Europe to protect its own interests, because national interest is what it matters in the international relations. So the FTA, which the folks are calling the mother of all deeds, and the new defense partnership just adds another layer to that, because without cutting off all of other partners also, because still India gets a ton of military gear and energy from Russia, but it diversifying smartly with the EU deal, which includes the tech sharing and the easier movement of skilled workers. So commerce minister within India, Piyush Goyal, have also made it clear that it stands alone and fits right to India's broader relationship. And on the EU side, we have seen that their minister is talking about that how they can also promote the openness, not going against anyone else, but also talking about the practical implication of the defense pact and the FTA deal between India and the EU.
Okay, Mr. Williams, now you mentioned how the US has shifted its strategy when it comes to the US. They've labeled threats from Russia as what they've said manageable and expect the allies to lead regional defense. Has Washington effectively given the EU and India a green light to form their own independent security architecture? And do you think that this somehow also contradicts itself? Because the statements when it comes to Greenland are quite different, but when it comes to Ukraine, they say Russia's manageable.
Uh, the short answer is no. The United States has not given a green light for EU and India to form its own separate security bloc. In fact, the United States sets great store in its relationship with India in the Indo-Pacific. So what's happening with the United States is they want Europe to take and spend more responsibility on its own defense, but they want to keep Europe subordinate to US strategic
doesn't Trump
will.
effectively want to, dismantle NATO? Wouldn't this be to the benefit, I suppose?
Yes, but you saw the statement by Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, this morning, that Europe can't defend itself without the United States against Russia. And I don't think many Europeans, some but not many, would want to break with the United States, even under Trump. So yes, the links are being loosened, the responsibility is being taken by Europe, but it's not broken in the sense that the United States abandoning all political control of Europe.
Okay, Mr. Manas, now the pact mentions joint developments. Could we see India becoming a primary manufacturing hub for European defense technology as Europe tries to de-risk and navigate the US supply chains, given what's happening between Russia and Ukraine?
I believe that that seems very likely, because the joint development is a part of the security and defense partnership, which is just setting up the stage for India to become a major hub for becoming European defense tech. And Europe is also looking to spread out its risk away from the US dependent, because especially with the tariffs and the policies which are already in the power play. So the pacts basically talks about the co-producing weapons and working together on the industry side.
Yes.
And whereas if we talk about India has already been working on its program like Make in India and Make It Happen. So think about stuff like chips.
My
Yes.
question here, sorry if I apologize for cutting you off there, but my question here is how will India be able to maintain or navigate, I suppose, the multi-alignment between, the EU along with Russia manufacturing for the EU weaponry while maintaining a decent relationship with Russia?
So, because we have already seen a build-up with the visits of European teams and the groups like Society of Indian Defense and Manufacture visiting each other. Plus, there is a plan for the security of information agreement to share sensitive data safely. So, which would also speed up the technology transfer. Of course, it will take some time to sort out the rules and the standards, but this will also could revamp and India's defense export and help Europe also to build up more reliable chains. So I believe that it's a win-win situation for both India and Europe, and they'll not be dependent on other partners for as such, because this is just a new initiative by India and Europe, and there would be new the drawbacks or the new changes which will happen from time to time.
Okay, Mr. Williams, let's get your take here as well. What do you think Europe may gain militarily from partnering with India, and what possible gains could India get, politically speaking, from this partnership?
The gains for Europe in the defense field is to sell more defense equipment to India and being competitive with the United States. And the EU doesn't have a military arm as such, so it can't engage in exercises, major exercises with India, but it can share technology, it can develop equipment and so on. It can sell, and India can sell to Europe. Europe is increasing its expenditures, and many European countries, while dependent on the United States, don't want to be dependent for their defense equipment totally on the United States. So India can manufacture things like 155 millimeters artillery shells, which is key to the war in Ukraine, for example.
What about India? What would India benefit from this relationship?
Well, I think that India would benefit politically, and it would benefit from being able to integrate more fully with the European market. It's in search of development and economic opportunity. But one thing that's not mentioned is Pakistan. Pakistan has cleverly aligned itself with Trump. Pakistan, in the conflict last year with India, I think sent shockwaves through India and beyond about the brinkmanship it was willing to go to. So I think having a European ally on the same lines of Indian peace ideas, I think is good for India.
Okay, Ms. Manas, now does the inclusion of the Joint Defence Initiative in the free trade agreement suggest that trade and military technology are now sort of inseparable in the eyes of both Brussels and New Delhi?
Definitely, because definitely it shows that that for both Brussels and New Delhi, trade and military tech are the pretty much very pretty much tied together now, because the FTA is most about cutting tariffs and opening markets, but now it is also linked up with the security and defense partnership, which dives into the co-developing technology, sharing industry, know how to teaming up on cybers and COps. So they see you cannot have a strong economies without secure tech and supply lines, especially with the hybrid threats which is coming up. For instance, the deals, this deal encourage working on the defense technology together, blending trade perks like lower duties on high-tech military stuff. So officially on both sides, I would say they have pointed out that how they can tackle the all the common issues together, like not relying too much on the big supplies and also not dependent on the other economies. So it also tries to renew renew the Science and Technology Pacts for 2025 to 2030, which covers the green energy, innovation, and of course the defense. So I believe that it's a very smart move, grown up by a partnering together and using economic stuff to back up security needs. It's a win-win situation for both Brazil and New Delhi.
Okay, Mr. Williams, how do you think Beijing may interpret the deeper India-EU defence coordination?
Well, I think Beijing is wise enough to not make any objection or comment on the security element of the pact, because it knows that the EU also wants to have good relations with China, and so it would see this relationship as an acceptable one, because it doesn't actually threaten China. It's not directed against anyone except building up the ability of Europe and India to have their own controllable defense industries.
Okay, Ms. Manas, now the US again is holding Russia manageable, or the threat from it manageable. If the EU and India are deepening ties, how do you think they can reconcile the vastly different views when it comes to Moscow, especially given India's historic energy and military ties with Russia? Is this possibly going to be an issue or a talking point between the trilateral sides, I suppose?
I believe that it can really make a real difference in deterring moves in the Indian Ocean, because especially from China, because the US Defense Secretary is laser focused on the first island of chain, like around Taiwan and the South China Sea. So it doesn't cover everything else as much, but the EU-India Pact, this steps into with the emphasis on the sea security, stopping weapon spreads and joint ops right in the Indian Ocean, where India is already the main guardian with its navy and the bases. So European chips with top-notch monitoring tech, cyber skills, practices in the group exercises makes the whole thing stronger. So this could also go to also go with the India Euro, the shared patrols or internal swaps, like the critical spots which are there in the Indian Ocean, like Malacca Strait or Arabian Sea, which are huge for the world trade. So it counters, I believe, it counters the strategies like China's Belt and Road Initiative projects and the bases which are there in Djibouti and Sri Lanka. So this pact builds on existing Navy talks and fits with the EU's Indo-Pacific plan in India's Sagar vision. So definitely, I believe that sure it will also add the ongoing effort and the funding, plus linking up with the groups like Quad, but it also solid more toward better balance in the region.
Okay, Mr. Williams, does the combination of trade and defence cooperation suggest a new model for alliances?
Well, I think the old alliance system is almost dead now. This sort of alliance of closely knitted states pointed to one enemy and so on. And so, yes, it is an alternative to an alliance system which is on its last legs. And so, yes, trade, defense cooperation, industrial cooperation is a way of stabilizing the world through trade and through cooperation. So yes, it is a positive element. And as I said, Beijing will not see this as a threat to it, but it will keep an eye on the agreement, but not as a threat.
Okay, thank you so much. That was Nicholas Williams, a former NATO official, and Niraj Singh Manas, a special advisor for South Asia at the Parlay Policy Initiative. Thank you both for your insights, and thank you for joining me here. This brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.